The introduction chapter for Life of Lewa, as you may have guessed, didn't exist during starter RP days. As the story grew and time went on, I came up with concepts that help answer the mysteries we ignored during playtime. When we decided to start up LOL as a story, I had plenty of time during the 2-year pause to rethink and locate several loopholes in our ideas. As an RP played between two people, the loopholes didn't really matter. We knew where we were coming from, and as long as we were having fun, inconsistencies didn't mean much. But I knew these inconsistencies would need to be fixed in order to make sense of the story for others reading. So I sat down and discussed things with the secondary director on how these loopholes might be fixed. This is when I invented the introduction to LOL. It was made to tie things together and give answers to mysteries that would otherwise throw the reader off if you didn't know the history that came before we get into the tale of LOL itself. A lot of things which were added into the introduction relate and connect on to future episodes not yet written. What that means is that at the time, during starter days of roleplay when LOL was first being made, the ideas were still fresh, and we had no idea where the story would lead or what we would add in. It's not till middle series that I invented creatures called Jusha, based off a hint secondary director threw in. And in time, specifically during the 2-year pause, I discovered more details of Bionicle canon history, and had come up with a few new ideas of my own that would help tie together several loopholes in the story's beginning. In other words, an introduction couldn't have existed for the LOL story if I would have started writing this tale as it was being played during 2010 through 2011, simply because the details added to the introduction weren't known till later. The introduction chapter only came to be because the story starter episodes had already been acted and new ideas have come into play for the series. The first paragraph of the introduction was written to make sense of a certain thing which was very important for the story. I made sense of the reason for why inhabitants of Motunui were able to marry and have offspring. This was added after a member on DA mentioned that it wasn't canon for characters of that universe to be capable of making more of themselves. Later I found this was in fact accurate. I planned to make an article to reveal why at a later time. So in order to make this story more believable in an alternate canon bionicle sense, I came up with a way around this little problem and made it so Motunui changed the forms of his inhabitants so they could keep their kind going, and even blend with the species they were based off of, thus making new kinds of sapient beings, far stronger than they could fathom. I also made Motunui change their metal compound to being a form of organic metal, for a reason that will later be mentioned in the series, where certain beings of certain tribes have full-body tattoos. The only way to make sense of this, especially because beings from the Motunui universe have mostly mechanical bodies, is to make their metal a form of organic compound, which can be poked and scratched like flesh, but doesn't necessarily bleed like their organic muscles. This in turn means both their organic understructures and their metal overstructures are malleable and therefore tattooable. That's the main reason I added that detail into the intro, and the rest is already spoken of. The one thing I will mention as an afterthought is the one way the tattoo concept could have worked without having to change their molecular structure. I would have to say the Toa have both ink tattoos and etched tattoos. Etched tattoos would basically be a mark that has been engraved and dyed into the metal of their bodies. But by making their metal organic, there would be no need for a process called etch tattooing. Just thought it would be interesting to mention anyway. Might be able to use the concept somewhere in the story at a later time. Making the Toa have organic metal compounds still seems to serve better for the story because of the whole transferring genetic coding to their offspring bit, so it's staying. In the second paragraph, I add in the subject of Perlite, my Ma character. Perlite is a very important factor in the story, and though I was weary of making her a larger factor in the tale, I'm so glad Disturbulator convinced me she was an important aspect in the LOL universe. Everything that follows in the introduction is all connected to Perlite, and a product of the elemental crystal around her neck. More important details of what this crystal is and who Perlite is, I plan to show through a fan fiction called Perlite Origins, which does in fact come before the LOL series and connects onto the LOL series. More details about that are for a later time. The basic thing to know is that how the universe of LOL is connects on to Perlite and the stone she wears. If anything seems odd or completely against Bionicle's storyline, the answer is Perlite. I mention all the details as to why things are the way they are in LOL by sharing a peek of Perlite's history as part of the intro chapter. You may wonder why I invented the time shift. The time shift is a very important factor of LOL and was invented to connect most of the loopholes that exist in LOL's beginning. There were some very large inconsistencies that were present. The main aspects were that we wanted to keep Lewa fairly young still, but realized he couldn't very well be young as we hoped when we started looking at aspects of this alternate world's culture. The culture and ages of certain characters indicated that the planet of LOL had existed for thousands of years, which would make Lewa a fairly old Toa by the time we get into the story of him living his life and finally meeting the woman of his dreams. This proved to be a problem, so I invented the time shift in order to make the story flow the way I wanted. The time shift made it so after 40 years of adapting to the cultures of the planet and dealing with problems along the way, the Toa, specifically Lewa, would still be rather young in their years and therefore have all the time needed to live their lives like normal people. Perlite returns after 40 years have passed, and I'll note she doesn't age according to this universe's time, which means she's young and about the same age she was when she left their world. More details as to why this is, I plan to make clear in Perlite Origins. She observes how the cultures of this world have adapted, and then the Crystal of Elements activates while she daydreams, which causes the oh so important time shift. The time shift basically speeds up and morphs time and culture of the LOL universe to fit Perlite's dreams and nightmares. What would have naturally occurred over thousands of years of adapting and living only took a matter of minutes. Within this matter of minutes, the planet became what it would be thousands of years in the future if it were left to form on its own, and therefore means the planet is ahead in its time, all things happening within a few minutes instead of a few thousand years. The only strange aspect to this is that no one knows this happened. They all believe they've been living this way from the start of time. Only Perlite knows that their world has technically only been united for the past 40 years and became thousands of years ahead in culture, style, technology, and new sapient species. Within that few minutes, a large history changing wave made the LOL universe what it is. And technically, in mind and occurrence, the people of this universe have been living on the planet for thousands of years. But because the time shift caused this and only happened in a matter of minutes, it only changed the time of the planet, not the age of the people already present. This makes it so the Toa are still rather young, but the planet and cultures are thousands of years old. And during this time shift, new sapient beings who didn't exist before were suddenly brought into the picture. But again, only Perlite knows they were never there originally, not till the accidental time shift.